Intermediate Desmos skill building task number 13. Plot a point on a curve. Okay, let's look. Graph a function. Oh, another function. And I'll repeat this again in case you haven't watched some of the previous videos. Let's say, for example, I start with an f of x because that's usually the way that I see these things. And I can do this as a y, but you're going to see that's kind of limited if I do that as far as plotting points that are on the graph. But this is I would say the power in being able to name your functions different letters, an F, a G, an H, and something like that, because then you can tell Desmos specifically which one of those functions to put your number into because you reference that letter. So if I call this thing f of x and start typing in a function, I'm going to have trouble on box number 24 or 25, whatever, that are down here, because back up here on number 12, I already have an f of x function. And then whenever I try to plug a point into that function, Desmos is going to get confused, like, which f function are you talking about? So there is an easy fix, and that easy fix is, of course, just, well, pay attention to what letters you've already used, and then choose something else. So instead of an f of x, I know I haven't used g, so I'm going to do a g of x instead. And surely you've seen examples of a g of x as a name of a function. And remember, g of x is just taking the place of y, but it's a little bit more specific so that if I have multiple functions, I can name which one I'm talking about. Okay, and then let's just I'm going to make something kind of cool, kind of interesting here. This is kind of function that you haven't seen yet, and you will get this eventually. It's a sine graph. If I go over here to functions, this is on the keyboard. Now on your Chromebook version, this is completely hidden from your view until you hit the little keyboard in the bottom left-hand corner. When this pops up on the right, you go to functions, and up top, these are just trig functions. These are kind of fun. So I'm going to do sin, which is short for sine, and inside there, of course, I'll put my independent variable x. And so this wave, this wave shape here for this graph, that is the sine function, which is kind of cool. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a point on this graph that I can move around, and it's stuck to the graph. And I don't want to just say put a random point and then drag that random point from up here in quadrant 1 and put it on the graph. No, I want it to be anchored into the function. And I'm going to do this with sliders like I've done some of the other tasks. Now, here's what you want to realize. Let's say, for example, I go down here to 24. I want to choose a letter for my slider that I haven't used yet, and I'm pretty sure I've used A, B, and C. So let's try D. D is the next one in line, and I'm going to do D is equal to, and I'll just do 5 for right now. Now, whenever I go down here to box number 5, it, of course, turns that into a slider. So let's say that I didn't pay attention to the letters that I was using. I used an A again. Whenever you do the next step, it should have a little triangle where the little box 25 is as a warning. If you just hover over or click on that warning, it'll tell you what's wrong so you can fix it. Okay, now what I want to do is basically take this 5 and plug it into the function, the g of x function, in order to get a point that's on that graph. That's the way functions work. A function has an input. For me right now, it's my 5. And then its output is whatever g of 5 is. That happens when I plug 5 into my function. So here's just an example. If I open up my parentheses and I type in my 5 and then a comma, so there's my x value, to get the y value that goes with it, I'm plugging 5 into the g of x function. So I just typed that. So it is g parentheses and put a 5 inside of it. And then here's my little point. The problem with this point, I can label this so we can see this, is that I can't move this point around. It's a static point based on the 5 that I put in there. But notice that it is, in fact, on the graph. I'll zoom in. You can see it is definitely on the graph. Okay, what I want to do is, instead of making a 5, let's make it D. D is going to represent my X value that I can change by moving my slider, right? So here, I'm going to go back up here to my 5, delete it out, and I'm going to put my D in there. D. And right now, my d is 5, so g of 5 actually makes sense. However, I don't want it to always be 5, because what if I move my slider? You can see that, oh, yeah, that didn't work because it's always given me the g of 5. So inside of the parentheses where the g of 5 is, delete out the 5 and make it the d. And so now our point is only dependent upon whatever the value of the slider is. And so this is the most excellent part of this whole thing. This is the reason why I chose this function, because it's now like a little roller coaster. And you can see my point is moving along the sine curve, and it's anchored in. And not only can you just do it with a slider, you can also just grab your points with your finger if you have a touch screen, and you can drag it around. Or if you don't have a touch screen, you can of course use your little trackpad and you can drag it around, and it is anchored to the point, anchored to our function.